question to.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for attending the PACSP Grant Virtual Summit. This morning, we have a wonderful presentation prepared for us on leveraging HR to create a better workplace and school. And our guest speaker is Valerie Nance from Penn Charter School for Entrepreneurship. Just want to share with you a little about Valerie. Valerie Nance is the Human Resources Director for Penn Hill's Charter School of Entrepreneurship, located in Pittsburgh, PA. Her human resources career began in 2006 at Carnegie Museums of Pittsburgh, where she held progressively responsible positions within the HR department until she left the organization in 2014. Valerie worked in the nonprofit sector and insurance, construction, and real estate industries before obtaining her current role in 2018. Her first HR director and professional mentor was an employment law attorney who, from the time Valerie was an administrative assistant, instilled in Valerie reverence for the deep connection between the law and HR. Valerie obtained a Master of Jurisprudence degree in labor and employment law from Tulane Law School in 2023. She has served as a committee member and volunteer with the Pittsburgh Human Resources Association since 2016. Valerie earned her SHRM SCP Society for Human Resource Management Senior Certified Professional certification in 2020. She has a passion for animal welfare and enjoys attending dance performances, hiking, and collecting unique custom jewelry. So let's all welcome Valerie Nance as she shares with us her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cheryl, for the introduction. I appreciate it. I'm just going to share my screen now. If everybody can give a thumbs up if you can see my first slide. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So we're going to talk today about leveraging HR to create a better workplace and school. And thanks to Cheryl's beautiful introduction, we can skip this slide because she already introduced me. When I worked in the real estate and construction industry for a brief time in 2016, I had a supervisor. She was my HR director, and she loved this man on your screen right now, Jack Welch. And no wonder she loved this man because he said things like this: HR is the #1 most important department in a company. Now, why did Jack Welch feel this way? Well, he didn't always feel this way. Earlier in his career, he felt that HR was really a fluffy function, that these were the people who plan the parties, file the paperwork, and it's really sort of a frivolous, useless function within a company. But Jack Welch came to be an enormous champion of human resources because he came to understand that human resources is responsible for hiring the best players, ensuring the team is made of the best people, and developing talent. And he felt that HR should be involved with every aspect of a business. He felt that HR has to insist on having a voice at the table because HR has the power to create an atmosphere of growth and excitement and to make their bosses smarter by giving them more than they ask for. So I want to kind of open with that quote so that you can think about your own organizations. How is HR being used within your organization? Is that sort of older notion of HR as personnel, where you're filing the paperwork, planning the parties, or is human resources a strategic business partner, which is the modern sense of what human resources should be? So some learning objectives for today. We're going to talk about a blueprint for a successful HR department. We're going to talk about how to leverage HR to support the unique needs of charter schools in particular. some pain points that exist in education. And what exactly does HR do? And so there's this little picture represents every yinzer who approaches me, at a barbecue. Maybe it's a family barbecue, and they ask me what I do for a living. I'm introducing myself. HR. What's that? What's HR? What do you do down there in HR? And then when I kind of try to explain, they say, hiring and firing. And so that's kind of the perception of human resources, is that we hire people, we fire people. There's a lot more to it than that. And so you can see here that there is a blueprint for a successful human resources function. Now, I did not invent this. This comes from the Society for Human Resource Management, which is a global organization of HR professionals that sets a standard for expertise for our field. And so in 2011, SHRM, that's how we refer to it colloquially, SHRM began a program of research involving thousands of HR professionals, corporations, nonprofits, other organizations. And their goal was to identify the critical competencies that are needed for success in an HR professional. And the result of that research was what they called the SHRM competency model, which defined the behavioral competencies, the technical competencies, and the types of behaviors that are integral for success in human resources. Now, they're constantly evolving. I am the chair of the certification committee for the local SHRM chapter, the Pittsburgh Human Resources Association. I can tell you that this is constantly being evaluated and looked at. Most recently, this was overhauled and updated in 2021, and it's called the Body of Applied Skills and Knowledge, or BASK. And this represents an evolution of that competency model by further defining those knowledge areas in addition to the behavioral competencies. So in other words, this is everything your HR department brings or should be bringing to the table to support your charter school. So let's blow out some of these different areas and talk about how this is applicable to our industry as education and charter schools in particular. So we've got the life cycle of a charter school. Step one for any HR professional is to understand our business. If you have an HR professional who is in an ivory tower, sitting up in an office, they're not talking to employees in their workspace, they don't understand the industry, that's a mistake. Because we need to understand the business of what we do. We need to understand the needs of our stakeholders. So who are our stakeholders as charter schools? If folks want to just kind of throw out some answers, who are our stakeholders? This should be easy.
I want to say the staff and administration.
Staff are stakeholders. What about our students?
Students and families, yep, and the community, I would say.
Absolutely. Scholars, community, definitely. I can see in the chat. Local businesses, our partners, our community, taxpayers. Even if they're in opposition to charter schools and they're fighting what we do, we are still beholden to our taxpayers because they are funding what we do. And so we need to understand the needs of everybody in our community. So my job as an HR professional is to ensure success at every level of this process as defined on this slide. And we all, within the charter school space, within this webinar, are sometimes somewhere, maybe multiple places within this graphic you see here on this slide. So I want to talk further about what sets charter schools apart. What makes us special and different as an industry? And, as Cheryl so kindly introduced me, I started out in the nonprofit space as an HR professional for Carnegie Museums of Pittsburgh. I then moved into the insurance industry, real estate, construction, and landed in my happy place here in education. What makes charter schools so special is that, we represent the most significant innovation that K through 12 education has experienced in decades. We are a fast-growing school choice option, and it's a noble mission that we have. We advocate for the needs and potential of children who have been traditionally underserved. And parents choose to come to us. They choose to send their children to our schools. And we all know as charter school professionals that public education does not always serve the needs of every student, and that's why we exist. Disruptive innovation is defined as a novel change that displaces something that existed before, and charter schools personify that disruptive innovation. It's a powerful thing. And so what does that mean as a workplace and as a culture? There's no excuses. So for staff, teachers, our schools, our children who are doing the work, no excuse culture attracts ambitious workers, people who are attracted to continuous learning and professional growth. Charter schools are publicly accountable. We focus on building a comprehensive school culture. We focus on partnerships, team building, relationship building. We talked about those stakeholders, our involvement with those stakeholders. There's no room for complacency. There's a lack of silos. We have the freedom and often the necessity. Jesse and I were talking before a lot of folks joined about how we would have to wear a lot of hats in the charter school space because often we're operating very leanly. So there's a lack of silos. There's freedom to work across many areas of the school and gain a deep understanding of the school and our stakeholders' needs. So human resources professionals must embody the values that you see on this slide in order to successfully serve our charter schools. And by the same token, we have to encourage and focus and foster a positive workplace culture that represents the values that are listed here on this slide. So talking about those applied skills and knowledge, those competencies that we talked about that Sherm outlined for us. So throughout this presentation, I'm going to keep coming back to that blueprint from the Society for Human Resource Management. And leadership includes those skills, knowledge, abilities, and other characteristics that are needed to create a compelling vision and mission for human resources that aligns with the strategic direction of the charter school. And one of the very foundational and critical skills is the first one listed here: diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Now, I will address the fact that there are certain political groups, certain folks who have decided to politicize the idea of DEI. I'm not going to entertain that because I think I'm going to speak through my presentation of the business case for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. It is simply good business. It is also a social issue. So we're going to go deep and talk a bit about this is critical. We can't ignore it. We're not going to ignore it, and I'm not going to push it aside because if I'm going to talk about business, I have to talk about this. School mirrors society at large, and the same systemic ills that are present in the workplace, in society, are in the schools as well. Because when our scholars graduate from our organizations and go out in the world, they are graduating into a country where white households hold 84% of total household wealth compared to 4% held by Black households, where Latinas will not reach wage parity with white men until 2207 if current trends persist, where Black women are paid 64 cents for every dollar paid to white men. So are you okay with that world? I'm not okay with that world. I don't think any of us are okay with our children graduating into the state that society is in, based on those statistics I just outlined. So what is the work that charter schools are doing to support all students? Well, we're providing educational equity. We're meeting the needs of all students, and those are different for every student. We're differentiating. We're eliminating opportunity gaps. We're providing culturally responsive teachings. We're providing positive partnerships with stakeholders, with diverse stakeholders, providing models for our students that represent diversity. We're providing restorative practices rather than punitive discipline. And we have to address bias. When we're thinking about building a workplace culture that has the competencies to address these social ills and support our students and help build them up for the world that they are going to graduate into, we have to address unconscious bias because it's something that we all experience. We have to face the biases that are within our own selves and be able to hold up the mirror. And the workplace is rife with inequity. This is simply a fact that there are structural bias issues within every workplace and really baked into many of workplace laws that exist. So making the deconstruction of unconscious bias a consistent part of our workplace culture is critical. It's constant work for the HR professional, and it has to be done in partnership with school administration, managers, leadership, all employees, and external supports that we bring in, external contractors, partners, etc. Conversations have to be ongoing and they impact every facet of what we do, from recruiting to retention to training and professional development, every part of that employee life cycle. And so, to kind of back this up, I want to draw to your attention a wonderful report that was just recently published by the Congressional Black Caucus. And often legislators work in sort of this sterile environment. And when they're drafting bills, sometimes you read this language of the bill or the law and you think, well, this is someone who's never been in a traditional workplace, clearly. However, I want to applaud the Congressional Black Caucus because for this work and research, they went out to corporations and they spoke with employees and they really did the work to examine the best practices, the business case for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the study is called What Good Looks Like, a Corporate Accountability Report on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Because this is simply good business practice. When you look at these 12 areas, these lead up to excellent business practices because the wealth gap exists, because opportunity gaps and pay gaps exist. And if we cultivate within our workplace a shared vision of a more inclusive and equitable society, we have an obligation to all of the objectives that you see here on this slide. So again, I encourage all of you to look this up because it is a good report. So moving on to people knowledge. Now, this is kind of where my little model yins are at the beginning of the presentation, hiring and firing, So let's talk a little bit about hiring, talent acquisition, and those details. And the key to this section on people management is finding alignment. You can have the best strategy, the best building in the world, but you don't have the hearts and minds of the people who work with you. None of it comes to life. So how do we find that magical formula as an organization? We want to not only be a school of choice for families and scholars, but for that to work, we need to also be an employer of choice. Because if we're not an employer of choice, that's going to trickle down to our scholars and our families, and they're going to feel that disconnect with our organization. So this slide shows you some of the steps in talent acquisition, the steps in a recruiting process. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about what these steps are and how to do them. Provident Charter School did a pretty nice presentation at the conference that is available on the YouTube channel, and I do recommend that you check out their presentation because they did a lovely job in their presentation. What I want to focus instead is the strategic vision here. During each step in this process, key things are happening. So you want to have stakeholder interaction. You know, who's part of the screening process? Who's on your interview panels? Are you involving scholars? Is it appropriate to involve scholars? Ask yourself those questions. Are you involving parents? Are you involving board members? Are there staff members that are part of your interview process? How are they trained? What kind of training do they receive? What kind of evaluation and assessment do you go through for your candidates to make sure that there is an equitable process in selecting people to join your team? This ultimately impacts student success and the achievement of our organizational goals. So this is a critical process. You know, whatever the position is that you're looking to hire for, whether it's a receptionist, custodian, lunch aide, a teacher, an accountant, etc. Very critical to be really aware of the strategic goals of this process. So again, coming back to recruiting steps, but what's the goal? So number one, the basics. We want to make sure that the candidate meets the job-related qualifications. Do they have the experience? Do they have certification? Do they have the education? But beyond that, let's come back to our culture. What's our educational philosophy? Is the candidate aligned with that? Are we asking the right questions in our interviews to ensure that we're finding that alignment? Relationship building, adaptability, problem-solving skills. For us, Penn Hill's Charter School of Entrepreneurship, we want to ensure that they understand the entrepreneurial mindset and they can share that with and model that for our students. Cultural responsiveness is key. And making sure, again, that that's an equitable process. We're asking the same questions of each candidate. We're providing the same opportunity for each candidate. This makes it easier to compare our candidates. We have hard interviews. We ask very detailed, difficult questions because this is critical work. I would say this is sacred work. You know, asking about past performance, negative balance questions, which ask not so that you're so much tooting your own horn about how great you are, but where did you make a mistake and what would you do to change it? If you had a problem in front of you, how would you solve it? How have you solved problems in the past? We ask scenario questions that are challenging, pulled from the archives of our own experiences as a school. And a real game changer for us that we adopted and borrowed from Renaissance Charter School was the school visit, an immersive day-long school visit where folks get to experience our school environment. They job shadow, they meet with stakeholders, and that really, I think, had an impact on making sure that we were in alignment with our job candidates when we got to the hiring stage. So again, key is value alignment. On this, this slide, you can see where we are evaluating in a numeric way value alignment. You can see our core values here on the left side of the screen, and then we have in the middle, how is that represented during the interview? And then we rate using this rubric and compare the candidates to quantify and apply data to the process. And again, I already mentioned stakeholder interaction, making sure stakeholders are involved with the process. Once we hire the candidates, you know, one of the pain points, I think, for us as nonprofits, educational organizations, charter schools, is compensation. You know, we're not able to pay as much as maybe a traditional district is, certainly not as much as the corporate world. And so how do we address that as an organization and ensure that we are transparent, fair, equitable? And so on this slide, I have some suggestions. You know, be transparent, be consistent, develop job-based pay ranges, ensure that you have a pay strategy, structure, and philosophy, establish a job architecture. Pay frameworks need to be clear, conduct proactive pay equity analysis, audit periodically. Every year we go through and we do an equity analysis when we're planning our budgeting for the increases for the next year. And this is a highly skilled area of human resources. I'm not going to lie, it's not my strength. And so a few years ago, we brought in a consultant to help us with this process. And that's another thing that's important in HR is leveraging your external experts to help when there's an area that's not necessarily your highest level of strength. But compensation isn't just the salary that you bring home, it's the benefits package. And we've been very intentional at Penn Hill's Charter School of Entrepreneurship, thankfully, with the high support of our leadership, Dr. Jones, in ensuring that we are providing benefits for the whole person and really being very, very intentional in understanding, surveying our employees to ensure that we are meeting the needs of the whole person and understanding our population. So, for example, we offer pet insurance. We know that we have a lot of employees of childbearing age. And so we have a 5-day paid parental leave. We have a lactation pod on site. We have pre-K on site for our employees that our employees can take advantage of. We understand that student debt has been an issue for our employees. And so we have a tuition repayment program. We have dependent care available to our employees. So looking beyond just medical, dental, vision, and how can we provide a comprehensive program that provides robust medical benefits to our employees, what else can we give them to support their whole self? And encourage, making sure that this is a culture where employees know that their whole self is valued. With this slide, I want to stress that you can't always hold people to what they said maybe 3-5 years ago. And that's something that happened to me. So Cheryl, in her introduction, spoke about my first professional mentor. And when I started at Carnegie Museums as an HR professional, I had a creative writing degree. I was fairly newly out of college. I had a creative writing degree, and I fancied myself to be a writer. I was an artist, and I had actually published a few poems and short stories. It seems very far away from my life as it is now. But I really didn't see myself as a business professional simply because I hadn't been exposed to the workplace. I was very green. And so in my interview, I expressed that I was very happy working in an assistant capacity because I had other goals related to my artistic endeavors. Well, after 5 years working with that department, I found a passion for human resources, and my direct supervisors really supported that passion. They sent me to webinars, they sent me to conferences. I really worked on my professional development. I was very interested in the human resources field. And in 2011, we had a higher level benefits employee leave our department. Now in HR, you know everything about what's going on. And I came across a piece of paperwork. I was quite shocked and hurt and angry because I found out that a peer of mine had been selected to fill that position. It was a promotion and it was a higher rate of pay. And I was so confused because I thought, but this peer of mine has only been with this department for 2 years. I've been here for 5. I have a college degree. She has a high school diploma. She frequently takes off Mondays and Fridays. She's always calling off. What is going on here? So I was deeply hurt and I was deeply angry. And fortunately, I found this out on a Friday and I had some time to deal with my emotions. So after rage crying, I called the EAP. Yes, Human Resources used the Employee Assistance Program and talked through it. I talked through the situation with a therapist friend of mine, and I knew that I could not base what I was going to say to leadership on comparing myself to this other employee. I knew that I needed to focus on myself. And so I took some personal responsibility that, I believed that I had been doing the work to prove myself, but I didn't really toot my own horn to that director of mine. And so what I did is I put together a 5-year plan. I stated the certifications that I plan to achieve and what I wanted within my career and what my expectations were, and asked if they would be able to support me with these endeavors. Years later, 13 years later, just this summer, I had dinner with that HR director, that employment law attorney, that my first mentor. And it was very strange. Out of nowhere, she said, I want to apologize to you because I know you were really hurt when I promoted Tammy. And so I figured, okay, 13 years later, this is very strange for you to be coming out with this. But I said, okay. And she said, but you said in your job interview that you were happy just being an assistant. So I held on to that. So here's where we come back to this quote. She put me in a box and she left me there for 5 years. In spite of all the work I had done, the professional development I had engaged in. And so, yes, I can take responsibility for not tooting my own horn and asking for what I wanted from her. But also as a leader, I can look at her and I can say, well, maybe she had some blind spots. Number one, she didn't even post the job. She just promoted this other employee. And as a leader, let's pay attention to our employees. Don't hold them to something they said years before. Pay attention. Are they engaging in professional development? Have they demonstrated that they're engaged with your organization? Support that. Support that in your employees. As I said, a culture of learning and continuous improvement is critical. So tell me, true or false, professional development is just for teachers within our charter schools? False. I see false in the chat. Yeah, that's absolutely true. And this image was taken from our professional development week, and there are employees at all levels of the organization, all different positions. We really worked to create a conference type format with breakout sessions. We had a wellness day with Tai Chi, lessons on fatty liver, all kinds of things to support our employees. So really work to create and support skill development and learning with all of your employees. Don't just focus on your teachers. Other retention tools that we utilize, regular check-ins. It means so much to our employees to have people, leadership, visiting them within their workspace, see what they do, ask questions, engage in conversation, even if it's just for a few moments. Town hall meetings have been very effective, whether we do that at a grade level, department level, just with new hires, however we handle that. But to find different ways to engage with employees and obtain feedback and address their concerns is most important. Stay interviews. An exit interview is fine, but the employee is already out the door. So talk to your active employees about their experience within the organization and act on that feedback. Surveys, follow up on your surveys again, and we have a very strong mentoring program as well within our organization to support our employees. So a little activity for you, thinking about performance management, this part of the employee life cycle. Let's match the evaluation method with the employee type. So 360 evaluation. Which type of employee do you think that's most appropriate for? You can throw it in the chat if you like. And a 360 evaluation is when somebody says all staff, okay? 360 evaluation is when you have a group of, it might be stakeholders really, I would say, or peers or employees that are evaluating one employee. Now, this takes a lot of training. I would say this isn't necessarily appropriate for all staff unless you really are very conscious and intentional in training all staff. It can get very petty. I would say this is more for the CEO level, C-suite level employees. A 360 evaluation would be appropriate, and that should be a guided process. We have used an external consultant for that process. What about observations? Which employee is that appropriate for? Teachers, yeah. What about annual performance review? Everybody, yeah. It's good to have a good annual evaluation. What about self-evaluation, that reflective process? Everybody, yeah, great. Like to use for all staff, excellent. And continuous informal feedback. Definitely, this should be for everybody all the time. Thank you, Liz. Yes, because there should be no surprises during an annual performance review. There should have been continuous feedback so that the employee is aware of how they're doing. Thanks for engaging with us. And performance management tools, I just want to point out that we are blessed in the charter school space to have really nice tools available to us that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. The Pennsylvania Framework for Leadership is a great tool for principals. And of course, Danielson Framework is a wonderful tool for evaluating teachers. And then we have created a performance evaluation rubric based upon our core values at Penn Hill's Charter School of Entrepreneurship. Keep track of your retention and turnover metrics. Look at your patterns through the years. You can break this down as well by demographics. It's very helpful information, and it helps with a self-evaluation to understand, maybe our teachers over the age of 40, we have high turnover. Why is that? What's going on? Maybe teachers of color are leaving our organization after just 1 year. Why is that? Let's analyze those trends and make sure that we're on track and supporting our employees appropriately. Use the data that we have. So moving on to business skills and knowledge, HR professionals need to have consultation, analytical aptitude, and strategic alignment, a lot of which I've already spoken to. But coming back to this charter school life cycle, where are we within the life cycle? Well, I've pointed to some areas where my own school is as far as our life cycle. We're achieving and sustaining success, but we're also designing, we're planning, we're looking at expanding what we do. And so, this other graphic here shows a little map of kind of demonstrating the strategic planning process and how that can change. Even within one conversation, that map may change shape. And so how do we, as HR professionals, support our leadership with planning, organizational charts, leadership structure, job descriptions? How do we build stronger, and how do we get the right people on board and the right roles in place to support wherever we are within this life cycle? When we're thinking about the structure of our HR function, this encompasses people, processes, activities involved in the delivery of our HR services that drive organizational effectiveness. So organizational change, developing our talent pipelines, labor relations, if you're unionized, employee relations, any interaction between the organization and its employees regarding the terms and conditions of employment, and the use of new and emerging technologies to support HR. We have to have good interpersonal skills, and I'm going to talk first about building a network. Nobody succeeds in isolation. And if your HR professional is trying to do the work all by themselves, and not relying on external experts, not part of a network, not part of a professional organization, I would be really concerned, and I would encourage them to develop their network. And even beyond just the HR sphere. So I am part of the Pittsburgh Human Resources Association, the Society for Human Resource Management. But I've been so blessed here at Penn Hill's Charter School of Entrepreneurship because it's given me exposure to the coalition, and also to the Pennsylvania Diversity. Oh gosh, I'm blanking on the name. PEDC is what it's called, Educator Diversity Coalition. And finding through these voices of you all in the education space, alignment with what I've learned and what I know in the human resources space, but hearing it through a different lens and seeing it through a different lens, which is very exciting. And I've had the opportunity to encourage some folks from the coalition and or from the PEDC to come speak to the Pittsburgh Human Resources Association. What you have to say is applicable to the human resources space. We need to be sharing ideas and looking through these different lenses because it strengthens what we do as professionals and as people interested in improving the society we all live in. Shifting gears to focus on a global mindset. So why should I care? As an HR professional in Pittsburgh, we're not global. We have schools, just here in the Pittsburgh area. Why should I care about an employment law that's passed in Illinois or New York, or about what's going on in the employment law space in the United Kingdom? Well, because I want to have a global mindset. And I want to be a visionary HR professional. And maybe there are practices in other parts of the world or our country that I should be paying attention to because they may be coming to Pennsylvania, or that are simply best practices that could benefit our employees. And so I need to be keeping up on my news. And there's no excuse really not to. There's a lot of professional reading that we can be doing. Law firms put out weekly labor law and employment law updates that are very digestible and easy to read. But notice too how on this graphic, these are values that we are encouraging and fostering in our scholars. So again, coming back to, we need to model what we're teaching our scholars. These are characteristics and values that we are instilling in our students. Coming to the workplace knowledge, this encompasses corporate social responsibility, employment law, risk management, and the HR professional interacts with the law every day. I mentioned those legal digests that I have subscribed to that come every week. There's free of charge, no pay involved webinars that are put out through various law firms. Clark Hill, Littler is another one, where you can keep up on your legal knowledge because things are always changing in the employment law space. And we need to keep up, but also be able to communicate with our legal counsel and interact with either inside or outside counsel to ensure that we are compliant as an organization. And we must understand that the law and compliance is the floor. It's not the ceiling. We can always follow best practices, but we also need to be compliant in order to avoid risk for our organization. Coming back to corporate social responsibility, this is so deeply tied to our mission as charter schools in raising socially conscious leaders. And I'll come back to the PA Coalition of Public Charter Schools vision for 23 and 24 and beyond. We're cultivating future-ready skills in our scholars. We're preparing students for the 21st century workforce. We are preparing students for a global landscape. We are not just teaching core academic subjects. We are preparing our students to be problem solvers, communicators, collaborators, adaptable. Digital literacy is key. And these skills are going to equip our students to excel in an ever-changing world. So we have to model that. We have to forge strong partnerships and involve with our stakeholders, foster those abilities and skills in our workforce so that we can model ethical behaviors. The teacher shortage is a major pain point. So also think about what we're doing as charter schools to develop the pipeline of certified teachers in our region. Are we partnering with universities? Are we working with our own scholars to encourage them to go into the education field down the road? So hopefully I've given you a sense, as I move very quickly through a lot of information, how these two honeycomb structures are aligned. We have the body of applied skills and knowledge for the human resources function, but we also have the unique mission and work of charter schools. And so hopefully I've given you a sense of the alignment there, the work that human resources professionals are doing or should be doing. And hopefully it's given you some food for thought. As you're hearing this, do you have a human resources professional on board? If you do, is there maybe a need to expand the capacity of that professional, either through skill building, helping them build a network, supporting them, maybe by hiring another HR professional if they're overwhelmed and not able to fully execute all these responsibilities? So I'll open this up if anybody has questions.
And we'll keep an eye on the chat as well in case you might not want to raise your hand and just want to ask a question via chat. That's fine too.
Hi, this is Liz, and thank you for your presentation. It was really great. I just recently got my HR certification through HRCI. The last time I had it was like 30 years ago.
Yeah, congratulations.
So thank you. I recerted just to stay fresh, like you say. And I really think, like you said, SHRM and HRCI and those other organizations are really super helpful to people, because a lot of times you find yourself in human resources not knowing that you were headed there. And,
yes.
Like your evolution, same with me. I was a trainer and then I did HR for a while and spent a lot of time in the different HR disciplines. So I'm a huge proponent of using those networks, making sure that you're talking to the experts about things, especially compensation and benefits, because those are the things that really, it's like the bread and butter, right, for our people. So if
broker
we
is your
can,
hero.
yeah,
You got to have a good broker.
Exactly. So, I think you've got to have that basic, everybody's got to get paid on time and have the benefits that they need. But one of the things that we've found here at Seven Generations, you talked a lot about getting the right person with the right ethos for what you're trying to accomplish, right? So the charter schools usually have a mission, and we can kind of tailor our recruiting to that. But one of the things I think that helps us from a retention standpoint is that we do have a person here on staff who can help them navigate through. It's not just an 800 number to call to say, if you have a payroll problem, call this 800 number, or if you're struggling with your benefits, call this 800 number. I think that human touch is super important.
Yeah.
And, you talk about maybe not being able to pay as much as the districts or some of the other, that's invaluable. That those soft benefits, as I like to call them, aside from salary, are invaluable. And I think that we have become a school, an employer of choice, because we offer so many soft benefits in addition to, a more competitive salary now and a nice suite of benefits. But if you're in an HR role, go get educated on, and it's hard, but it'll bring things up and you'll be able to help with all of the things in the basque.
Thanks, Liz. Any other questions?
Well, I have a quick question. At what point do you consider different types of professional development and professional development for staff? Is it because there is something that you see happening that you feel needs to be addressed? Or is it because of the different mandates that are coming down from the department? What how do you determine when professional development is necessary?
I think a lot of that comes from the supervisors, the academic coaches, the folks who are directly working with the employees. Hopefully, they are trained and aware of what their employees' needs are. And, on an individual level, you can recommend to an employee, I'd like to see you build skills if it's a teacher with classroom management, for example. So we're going to send you to a conference or a webinar or whatever. But I think as far as the whole staff, of course, there are mandates. Title IX, we just had changes to Title IX that impact some of us if we're not under the injunction. We want to be proactive, but also there's things that just support the workforce in general, like bias. That is something that needs to be kept up all the time. Understanding DEI initiatives like microaggressions in the workplace, conflict in the workplace. So, I think it's just a really intentional process of paying attention to what employees are experiencing, are there patterns within the workplace, but also keeping up on those trends and compliance issues as well.
Thank you. And we received a request in the chat.
Trauma informed.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so if you have any information that you would like to circulate, that would be awesome.
Yeah, and Madison, do you mean like recommended human resources training, or what kind of programs do you mean? And I'm going to put up my contact info if anyone wants to reach out to me directly.
Yeah, I think a couple like HR certification programs were mentioned. I would love to know like if folks have recommended ones. When I do a cursory Google, there's so many. And so if there's any recommended programs, we'd love to hear what those are.
I'd be happy to reach out to you, Madison.
Yeah, there are a lot of them out there, a lot of good ones. There's also once you are certified, there are different levels of certification, but once you are certified, there's a continuing education requirement for any of the certifications. So they have lots of great webinars, lots of in-person things that you can attend. So the HR community is truly, when I started many, many years ago, it was not nearly the community that it is now. It's really looked on as a profession now, whereas before it was kind of an add-on, kind of like Jack Welch said, it's the most important thing. Love Jack Welch, by the way. Jack and Susie, gotta love them.
Well, if there are no other questions, keep in mind, Valerie has placed her email and contact and LinkedIn here. So please make note of that. Also know that Tuesday morning, this will be on our YouTube playlist. And we just want to take a moment to thank Valerie for sharing her day with us, sharing her insights, receiving the feedback and questions. And this is part of the community that exists within the charter community. And we're just very appreciative for everyone. So look forward to our next presentation in January on embracing steel. And this is going to be one of those times where it's hard to determine who exactly is going to be in that room, because there's a lot that's happening in this context of steel. Since we've spent so much time embracing STEAM, steel is going to be a very interesting opportunity. So once again, thank you. I'm Cheryl Johnson-Watts, Project Director for the PACSP Grant. On behalf of Jesse Bean, who is our Technical Assistance Leader, Sharon Tay Smith, who is our Member and Business Partner Management at the Pennsylvania Coalition of Public Charter Schools, and Charmaine Granison, who is our administrative assistant on the grant. We thank you all for your day, your time, and for all that you do for children and families. Take care.
Thank you.